The Battle of Ayacucho was a decisive military encounter during the Peruvian War of Independence. It was the battle that secured the independence of Peru and ensured independence for the rest of South America. In Peru, it is considered the end of the Spanish-American Wars of Independence, although the campaign of the victor Antonio José de Sucre continued through 1825 in Upper Peru, and the siege of the fortresses Chiloé and Callao finally ended in 1826. As of late 1824, Royalists still had control of most of the south of Peru as well as of Real Felipe Fort in the port of Callao. On December 9, 1824, the Battle of Ayacucho took place at Pampa de Ayacucho, a few kilometers away from Ayacucho, near the town of Quinua, between Royalist and Independentist forces. Independentist forces were led by Simon Bolivar's Lieutenant Sucre. Viceroy José de la Serna was wounded, and after the battle second Commander-in-Chief José de Canterac signed the final capitulation of the Royalist army. The modern Peruvian army celebrates the anniversary of this battle. Background: in 1820, Spain began what would shortly become a political disaster. An expedition of 20,000 soldiers waiting to be sent to Rio de la Plata to help the Royalists of America revolted under the encouragement of General Rafael Rigo. In the subsequent weeks, the revolt spread, and King Ferdinand VII was forced to restore the liberal Spanish Constitution of 1812, which he had suppressed 6 years earlier. This event ended Spain's ability to send reinforcements to America, which in turn eventually forced the Royalist armies of the Viceroyalties of Peru and New Spain, which had contained the Spanish-American Revolution so far, to deal with the Patriot forces on their own. The Royalists in each Viceroyalty, however, took different paths. In New Spain, Royalists, after defeating the insurgents, proclaimed a negotiated separation from liberal Spain through the Plan of Iguala, which they negotiated with the remaining patriots, and the Treaty of Córdoba, which they negotiated with the new head of government, Juan O'Donoghue. In Peru, Viceroy Joaquín de la Pezuela was discredited after a Royalist expedition to Chile under Mariano Osorio was defeated, and advances in Peru were made by José de San Martin. The viceroy was overthrown on January 29, 1821, in aÄnaŭkutŝo in a coup by General José de la Serna, who proclaimed his adhesion to the restored Spanish constitution. The independentists started the new year with a promising victory. At Cerro de Pasco they defeated a Peruvian Royalist army commanded by Viceroy La Serna. However, the Royalists had received solid military training. Their first victory came against the independentist army commanded by Domingo Tristan and Agustín Gamarra in campaigns in the Arica region. A year later, San Martin had withdrawn from the scene after the interview of Guayaquil, and Royalist forces had smashed Rudicondo Alvarado's liberating expedition. In campaigns in Torata and Moquegua, the year 1823 ended with the La Serna destroying another patriot army commanded by Andrés de Santa Cruz and Agustín Gamarra in yet another open campaign in Puno, which started with the Battle of Zepata and resulted in the occupation of La Paz on August 8. After scattering Santa Cruz's isolated troops, La Serna recaptured Arequipa after beating Antonio José de Sucre's Gran Colombian force on October 10. Sucre decided to evacuate the Gran Colombian troops, setting sail on October 10, 1823, saving himself and his troops, although losing the best of his cavalry. Viceroy La Serna ended the campaign after reaching Oruro in Upper Peru. On the political front, the last remnants of optimism among patriots faded away with accusations of treason against Peruvian presidents José de la Riva Agüero and José Bernardo de Tagle. Riva Agüero deported deputies of the Peruvian Congress and organized another Congress in Trujillo. After being found guilty of high treason by the Peruvian Congress, he was banished to Chile. This act, in turn, was considered by Simon Bolívar to be treasonous. Tagle, who had earlier ordered all armies under his command to support Bolívar against the royalist enemy, was now pursued by Bolívar, who was looking to capture and execute him. Tagle took shelter with the royalists in the fortress of Callao, which was under siege. Nevertheless, by the end of 1823, the situation had started to become critical for those who defended the king's cause. In spite of the impressive military triumphs, Bolívar's request for reinforcements from Colombia made him a threat to the royalist army. Both sides prepared for the confrontation they knew was coming. Viceroy La Serna, for his part, without direct communications with the peninsula, with the most sad news of the state of the metropolis, Spain, and reduced to its own and exclusive resources, but nobly trusting in his subordinates' decision, union, loyalty and fortune, hurried the reorganization of his troops and prepared for the fight with the giant of Costa Firme, Venezuela, that he saw coming soon. Another triumph for Spanish armies in that situation would make the Castilian flag wave again with unmatchable glory even to Ecuador, but another fate was already irrevocably written in the books of destiny. 1824 events: Buenos Aires truce and Callao revolt. Historian Rufino Blanco Fombona says that, by 1824 Bernardino Rivadavia had made a pact with Spanish, obstructing the Ayacucho campaign. On July 4, 1823, Buenos Aires made a truce with Spanish commissionaires that forced it to send negotiators to other South American governments so that it could take effect. It was stipulated that hostilities would cease 60 days after its ratification and would subsist over a year and a half. Meanwhile, a definitive peace and friendship would be negotiated. Among other measures taken by the Viceroy for containing the imminent rebellion, on January 10, 1824 Casimiro Olaneta was ordered, "I warn your Excellency that you should not arrange any expedition in any direction over down provinces without my express order because, besides they are having a meeting in Salta trying to negotiate." General Las Heras on government of Buenos Aires side and Brigadier Espartero on this superior government's side, Rivadavia believed that the project would establish peace and stop the Republicans' efforts to gain authority over Upper Peru, refusing assistance and withdrawing advanced posts, in detriment of the cause of Peru. The Irish military historian Daniel Florencio O'Leary was of the opinion that with the truce Buenos Aires has implicitly withdrawn from the struggle, and that the Buenos Aires government's pacts with the Spanish were to the detriment of the American cause. On January 1, 1824, Bolívar fell terribly ill in Pativilca. At that time, Félix Alzaga, plenipotentiary minister of Provincias Unidas del Rio de la Plata, arrived to Lima, requested Peru to adhere to the truce, which was rejected by the Peruvian Congress. Nevertheless, since February 4, 1824 various quarters of Callao mutinied, leading to the whole Argentine infantry of the Expedition Libertadora. The Mounted Grenadier Regiment of the Andes also revolted in Lurin on February 14. Two squadrons went over to the Callao to join the mutiny, but when they noticed that they had joined the Royalists, 100 of them, with their regiment commanders, went to Lima to join the Independentists. The unit was then reorganized by General Mariano Necarchi. In the midst of these events, the Minister of Colombia, Joaquín Mascara, fearing the ruin of our army, asked Bolívar, "And what do you plan to do now?" Bolívar, in a decided manner, answered, "Triumph." The events at El Callao extended the war until 1826, and had the immediate result that Lima was occupied by Canterac. It is said that had there been military action against Bolívar on May 26, it would have given the final blow to independence in this part of America. Olaneta's rebellion. Surprisingly, at the start of year 1824, the entire royalist army of Upper Peru revolted, led by Pedro Antonio Olaneta, a royalist, against the liberal viceroy of Peru. After receiving news that the constitutional government had fallen in Spain, the Spanish monarch Ferdinand VII and his absolutist followers had recovered control of the government, supported by 132,000 French soldiers from the Holy Alliance Army, which would occupy Spain until 1830. Rafael del Riego was hanged on November 7, 1823, and the other leaders of the liberal movement were executed, outlawed, or exiled from Spain. On October 1, 1823, the monarch decreed the abolition of everything approved during the last 3 years of constitutional government, which included annulling the appointment of La Serna as Viceroy of Peru. The scope of the purge of the constitutionalists of Peru seemed absolute. Añamôkutʃo then ordered an attack of the upper Peruvian royalists on the constitutionalists in the Peruvian viceroyalty. La Serna changed his plans of going down to the coast to fight Bolívar and sent Geronimo Valdés with a force of 5,000 veterans to cross the river Desaguadero, which took place on January 22, 1824, in order to drive them to Potosi against his former subordinate, because there are indications of a meditated treason. Joining the dissidents of Buenos Aires. Memorias para la Historia de las Armas Españolas en el Perú by Peninsular official Andrés García Camba detailed the radical change that the events in Upper Peru produced in the Viceroy's defensive plans. After a long campaign in the battles of Tarabuquillo, Sala, Cotagaita, and finally La Lava on August 17, 1824, both royalists' forces of Viceroyalty Peru and of the provinces of Upper Peru were decimated. Bolívar, having news of Añamôkutʃo's actions, took advantage of the dismantling of the royalist defensive system so that he moved the whole month of May to Jaya, and faced José de Canterac, who was isolated in Junín on August 6, 1824. Unrelenting prosecution of the war started, with the consequent desertion of 2,700 royalists, who immediately went over to the independentists' lines. Finally, October 7, 1824, having his troops right in front of the doors of Cusco, Bolívar gave General Sucre the command of the new battlefront, which followed the course of the Apurimac River, and he withdrew to Lima in order to negotiate more loans to keep the war going in Peru, and to receive a Colombian division of 4,000 men given up by Paez which would arrive after Ayacucho.